immediately claiming central space, preparing to develop pieces and establish a pawn phalanx. Developing the knight to its most active square immediately, contests the center and prepares for flexible pawn structures. Opening a diagonal for the queen and eye on the queenside territory. Solidifying the center and preparing to develop the bishop, but it does invite a space advantage for white. Developing a knight to its most natural square reinforces the center and prepares for queenside expansion. Developing a bishop to pin the knight creates immediate central pressure and challenges white's pawn structure. Securing the pawn and preparing to castle kingside, this maneuver subtly increases white's central influence while preventing immediate tactical complications. Asserting central space, this pawn advance ignites the queen's pawn game, creating immediate counterplay and challenging white's established structure. Breaking the central bind offers piece activity, but opens the d-file for immediate pressure. Opening the center further with this pawn capture is a standard response, aiming to challenge white's pawn structure and prepare for piece development. Developing the bishop here pins the knight, directly challenging black's central structure and preparing for future queenside expansion. Challenging the bishop's influence, this pawn advances, creating immediate tension and dictating the next strategic direction. Retreating the bishop maintains its active diagonal influence, preventing immediate pawn weaknesses. Aggressively advancing the kingside pawn storm exposes the black king to significant danger. This repositioning of the bishop aims to preserve material and avoid immediate tactical skirmishes on the kingside. Suddenly, knight sees central squares, creating immediate tactical possibilities and forcing white to reevaluate piece placement. Solidifying the center opens lines for your bishops and prevents knight advances. Solidifying the kingside pawn structure, this move aims to support the knight's adventurous foray while preparing for central pawn expansion. Solidifying the center and preparing to castle, this develops a piece and enhances white's control over key squares. Opening the g-file for your rook offers attacking potential, though it weakens your kingside pawn structure. Opening the h-file defensively creates an escape route for your king. Developing the bishop to its best square enhances central control and prepares for potential queenside expansion. Securing queenside space, this pawn advance simultaneously dissuades black's bishop from encroaching further while preparing for potential queenside expansion. The bishop retreats, preparing to join the queenside defense and potentially eye the c5 square, a cautious but necessary repositioning. Aggressively seizing the initiative, this pawn thrust aims to destabilize black's king by opening lines and creating immediate attacking chances. Exploiting white's doubled pawns, this capture ignites the kingside and cracks open lines toward the beleaguered monarch. Opening the g-file now creates immediate attacking possibilities for white. Unleashing the bishop to the h5-e8 diagonal creates immediate counterplay, targeting white's weakened kingside pawn structure. Sharpening the attack, white aims to expose black's weakened kingside pawns. Sacrificing the bishop opens a clear path for your queen to disrupt white's pawn structure. Queens now dominate the center, eyeing weaknesses on the kingside and potentially opening lines for a swift assault. A misplaced knight, isolated from its defensive duties, inviting immediate exploitation of the queenside. Unlocking the e-file centralizes the queen and prepares a decisive pawn push, aiming to crack open the position. Releasing the queen from its passive post, black immediately seeks to exploit white's slightly uncoordinated queenside pawns and potentially open lines toward the king. Exchanging queens simplifies the position, potentially leading to an endgame where pawn structure and piece activity become paramount. Establishing a knight outpost on f6 now offers immense comfort, anchoring defense and preparing for central pawn breaks. Initiating a decisive kingside push, this advancing pawn aims to disrupt black's knight and seize valuable central territory. Re-engaging the knight to d7 prepares for central pawn breaks and supports the queen's active placement. Initiating cavalry to bolster the kingside, anticipating a potential knight exchange and seeking better squares. Igniting the kingside fight, the rook ventures onto the open file, eyeing the vulnerable pawn structure. Unleashing the monarch from its initial shelter offers a welcome respite, potentially activating central participation and improving piece mobility. Initiating knight redeployment to seize the crucial c4 square, preparing to challenge white's queenside influence. Solidifying the queenside, this pawn push prepares for a modest queenside expansion and prevents black's knight from enjoying immediate outpost prospects. This brings the king into the heart of the action, eyeing central squares and preparing for a potential king walk. The knight's journey to the queenside aims to contest the open c-file and pressure black's weakened pawn structure. Centralizing the rook on the c-file now pressures the isolated pawn and aims to activate the piece. Securing the king's central retreat offers a platform for unified piece activity and potential pawn advances. Unleashing a pawn break to shatter white's central control and activate black's pieces. Liberating the c-file is key, opening lines and creating pressure on the d-pawn. Recapturing the pawn immediately opens the c-file and activates black's rook, putting pressure on white's position. The knight sprints toward the queenside, aiming to disrupt black's newfound central pawn structure and exploit potential weaknesses. Repositioning the rook to the queenside seeks to defend the pawn and prepare for queenside expansion. Asserting open lines, this rook now eyes the critical c-file, preparing to exploit pawn weaknesses and enhance piece mobility. Exchanging the rook opens the c-file for further pressure and simplifies towards an endgame where black's knight might find better squares. The rook now firmly occupies the crucial open file, pressuring black's weakened queenside structure. Snatching that pawn initiates a race where material gain might outpace king's safety. Seizing the open file, the rook now aggressively pressures black's vulnerable queen. Unifying the pieces towards the weakened kingside seems the primary objective here. Opening the central files now grants the knight a clear path to the queenside pawn majority. Securing the rook on its active outpost on the file hints at a potential breakthrough or coordinated attack along the queenside. Seizing the isolated pawn sacrifices material, but opens lines towards black's exposed king. Repositioning the king to a more central square offers it better protection and prepares for potential rook activity. Pioneering a breakthrough along the kingside, white seeks to exploit the exposed monarch and seize initiative. Securing the queenside flank against white's encroaching pawns initiates a vital defensive sequence. Controlling the open file becomes paramount, forcing black to react to this pressure on the central column. The knight's retreat to d7 signals a regrouping maneuver, aiming to re-establish positional pressure on the central squares and potentially reroute for further activity. Repositioning the knight to control the central squares and prepare for potential pawn advances. The knight retreats, creating a strategic blockade on the file, preparing to contest the crucial queenside advance. Initiating a pawn avalanche toward the enemy monarch to shatter any defensive structure. Prying open lines towards white's king creates immediate tactical possibilities. Unleashing the knight offers a dynamic pawn thrust, aiming to expose the black king's sanctuary by opening lines. This defense embraces the pawn fork, sacrificing material to disrupt white's king's safety and potentially exploit the open d-file. Unleashing a forceful knight check that dictates the black king's flight path, forcing a critical decision about its safety. The king steps into the path of the opposing knight, a daring gambit that sacrifices immediate safety for potential counterplay. Unleashing the pawn's advance, this move creates a crucial outpost and pressures black's weakened queen flank. Opening the FXC file irrevocably compromises the king's shelter, a desperate gamble born of cramped circumstances. Unlocking the d-file and forcing black's king further out offers white tactical opportunities. Fleeing the pawn storm, the knight retreats to defend the weakened kingside pawn chain. Stepping forward with the knight repositions it to a more active square, eyes fixed on potential knight forks and king intimidation. Reactivating the knight to its central outpost opens dynamic possibilities for piece exchange or regrouping. Unleashing the kingside pawn storm offers a chance to crack open the defenses, but watch for the knight's repositioning.